With March of the Machine fully released, it's time to take a closer look at our top 10 legendaries from the set with a 3-step guide that'll be easy for you to follow, provided you'd like to make one of these legendaries your newest commander. And in no particular order, we have number 10, Bright Palm Soul Awakener. For 1 generic Anaya, 4/3 legendary creature, Fox Shaman, backup 1. Whenever this creature attacks, double the number of +1/+1 counters on target creature. That creature can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less this turn. So the general strategy here is to flicker and stack up backup triggers. Turn those 4 counters into 8, then 16, 32, 64, 128, needless to say, someone's getting knocked out. First thing you'll want are flicker effects for Bright Palm to stack up backup on a creature and get insane value, with cards such as Eldrazi Displacer, Emiel the Blessed, and Restoration Angel. Next, you'll want to consider extra combats to get additional triggers off your backup effect. There's no kill quite like Overkill. Cards like Portraiser, Morag Fury of Akum, and Breath of Fury are definite includes. And lastly, if you want to make a 1/1 a 500/500, the only problem standing in your way is removal. So toss in some creatures with built-in protection, such as Silhana Ledgewalker, Wilson Refined Grizzly, and Toski Bearer of Secrets. And at number 9, we have a Tali Primal Conqueror for 5 generic and 2 red, 7/7 legendary creature, Elder Dinosaur. Trample. When a Tali Primal Conqueror enters the battlefield, each player exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile a non-land card. You may cast any number of spells from among the non-land cards exiled this way without paying their mana cost. For 9 generic and 1 green Phyrexian, transform a Tali into a Tali Primal Sickness, an 11/11 legendary creature, Phyrexian Elder Dinosaur. Trample, indestructible. Whenever a Tali Primal Sickness deals combat damage to a player, they get that many poison counters. So a Blightsteel Colossus with virtual card draw, and it can be your commander. You'll want to ramp into an Infect win, or replay your commander to play everyone's deck. For starters, let's talk about ramp to get that quick Infect kill, with cards like Burgeoning, Circle of Dreams Druid, and Selvala Heart of the Wilds. Next, a little bit of evasion will go a long way here, with cards like Whisper Silk Cloak, Fleet Feather Sandals, and Commander's Plate. Lastly, you'll want to consider extra ETBs, because why do you just want to play your deck? Cards like Conjurer's Closet, Twin Flame, and Delina Wildmage will help in this regard. And at number 8, we have Kroxa and Kuneros. Definitely check out the list we made together on our most recent live stream. But for 3 generic and Mardu, 6/6 legendary creature, Elder Giant Dog, Vigilance, Menace, and Lifelink. Whenever Kroxa and Kuneros enters the battlefield or attacks, you may exile 5 cards from your graveyard. When you do, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. The best stats, the best keywords, and the best boys, all on 1 card. Fill your grave and reanimate into some crazy stuff. For this list, you're going to want to fill your grave with some fodder and ferocious creatures, with cards like Mesmeric Orb, Altar of Dementia, and Buried Alive. Altar of Dementia being a 2-card combo with K&K. Next, you'll need utility creatures to control the game while you grind for value, with cards like Elish Norngran Cenobite, Massacre Worm, and Emiria Shepherd. Last, you want some big dumb game-ending bombs, like Razaketh the Foul-Blooded, Villas Broker of Blood, and Morag Fury of Akum for extra attack and reanimate. And at number 7, we have Moira and Teshar. For 3 generic and Orzhov, 4/5 legendary creature, Phyrexian Spirit Bird. Flying. Whenever you cast a historic spell, return target non-land permanent card from your graveyard to the battlefield. It gains haste. Exile it at the beginning of the next end step. If it would leave the battlefield, exile it instead of putting it anywhere else. Orzhov Stompy has never been so scary. Mill some massive beaters and reanimate them to strike fear into your opponents. Next up, you'll need cards to fill your grave, such as Mesmeric Orb, Altar of Dementia, and Buried Alive. So far as our bombs are concerned, in this deck, Bolas' Citadel is way up there. Razaketh the Foul-Blooded is another great entombed target, and Elish Norngran Cenobite for those longer games. Lastly, you'll want all the protection and more on this list, so consider Imp's Mischief, Surge of Salvation, and Blacksmith Skill. And at number 6, we have Rona, Herald of Invasion. For 1 generic and a blue, 1/3 legendary creature, Human Wizard. Whenever you cast a legendary spell, untap Rona, Herald of Invasion. You can tap her to loot, and for 5 generic and a black Phyrexian, transform Rona into Rona Tolarian Obliterator. A 5/5 legendary creature, Phyrexian Wizard with Trample. Whenever a source deals damage to Rona Tolarian Obliterator, that source's controller exiles a card from their hand at random. If it's a land card, you may put it onto the battlefield under your control. Otherwise, you may cast it without paying its mana cost. Looting is nice, but what's nicer is using a ping effect to cast your cards for free, or forcing your enemies to bite the bullet with tricky effects. For this list, we'll want to consider some self-damage with the Witches, Pestilence, and Plague Spitter. Next, you want to force your opponents to do damage with cards like Angel's Trumpet, Pariah's Shield, and Arena. Lastly, we want a handful of bombs to leverage off the Obliterator, such as Peer into the Abyss, Omniscience, and Enter the Infinite. And at number 5, we have Slimefoot and Squee. Jun finally got a good Goblin Commander. Oh look, it also combos with Dockside. Might be too spiky for the casual player, but has a lot of cEDH potential. For starters, we can keep the deck relatively fair by keeping it Goblin Tribal, with cards like Grumgully the Generous, Wort the Raid Mother, and Vexing Shusher. Well, that last one's maybe not so fair. Why Goblin Tribal? Well, there's a Dockside loop in this list, and Goblin Matron is at the helm. So having a few more Goblin utilities outside of that are excellent to have. But our 3 combo cards are Skirk Prospector, the Matron, and Dockside Extortionist. The win con, you ask? Well, grab every Goblin from your list and play them, or a Mog Fanatic. The choice is yours. Lastly, it's important we have Saprolings to sacrifice, so outside of Slimefoot and Squee, I would consider Tendershoot Dryad, Utopia Mycon, and Slimefoot the Stowaway. And at number 4, we have Thalia and the Gitrog Monster. For 1 generic, an Abzan 4/4 legendary creature, human frog horror, first strike, death touch. You may play an additional land on each of your turns. Creatures and non-basic lands your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. Whenever Thalia and the Gitrog Monster attacks, sacrifice a creature or land, then draw a card. A princess and her frog ride into battle with one of the most annoying keyword pairs. Draw cards, fill your grave, and ramp. True love conquers all. You definitely want to consider recyclers, like Reassembling Skeleton, Blood-Soaked Champion, or Persistent Specimen. Lands matter here, so consider Ruminant Excavator, Lotus Cobra, and Felidar Retreat. Lastly, you want to stacks out the board, and the best way to do so is with cards like Eidolon of Rhetoric, Collector Oof, and Sanctum Prelate. And at number 3, we have Zimone and Dina. For Sultai, 3/4 legendary creature, human dryad. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, target opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Tap and sacrifice another creature, draw a card. You may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield's tapped. If you control 8 or more lands, repeat this process once. Control out a game to drain your opponents down. Add some self-reanimation to ramp into infinity. Will you play Gate Tribal or Counterspell Tribal? The choice is yours. Much like Thalia and Gitrog, we'll want to consider some recyclers like Bloodghast, Reassembling Skeleton, and Scoot Swarm. And for this list, let's consider some value lands such as Maze's End, Field of the Dead, and Glacial Chasm. And to leverage Zimone and Dina's effect as much as possible, we want some untappers, such as Murkfiend Liege, Seeker of Skybreak, and Freed from the Real. And coming in at number 2, we have Baral and Kari Zev. For 1 an Izzet, 2/4 legendary creature human, first strike, Menace. Whenever you cast your first instant or sorcery spell each turn, you may cast a spell with lesser mana value that shares a card type with it from your hand without paying its mana cost. If you don't, create First Mate Ragavan, a legendary 2/1 red monkey pirate creature token. Gains haste until end of turn. What's better than free spells, you ask? Free monkey? Play instant tribal and cast that dig through time to get a free Nexus of Fate. For this deck, we'll want to consider some bomb spells, such as Nexus of Fate, Overwhelming Intellect, and Expropriate. But those are so expensive, I hear you say. Well, we're trying to cast them for free, and we'll do so with cards that self-reduce, such as Blasphemous Act, Dig Through Time, and Commandeer. To keep our hand flush in Baral and Kari Zev, we'll want to consider cards like Verity Circle, Treasure Cruise, and Reforge the Soul. And lastly, at number 1, we have Shalai and Halar. For 1 generic and Naya, 3/3 legendary creature, Angel Elf. Flying Vigilance. Whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are put on a creature you control, Shalai and Halar deals that much damage to target opponent. Everyone loves counters. Build up some counters on a creature and use cards like Hydra's Growth or Solidarity of Heroes to double your counters and do massive damage. And if you want an easy combo, consider War Elemental, Red Terror, or Heliod Suncrown to just do infinite damage. But so far as general strategy is concerned, consider counter build-up, with cards like Felidar Retreat, Cathar's Crusade, and Forgotten Ancient. Next, you'll want to consider counter doublers, such as Hydra's Growth, Solidarity of Heroes, and Fractal Harness. And as far as simple combos are concerned, the aforementioned Red Terror, Heliod Suncrowned, or a Johnny's Pridemate, plus some way of giving S&H lifelink will get the job done. And that's it for our top 10 legends and general strategies on how to play them from March of the Machine. Did your favorite legends make the list? If not, which were they? Let us know in the comment section down below. But for more news and coverage on your favorite TCGs, subscribe to LGG and send this video along to the next gamer with a like. Thank you guys.